Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Arnold Podcast. Today we will be covering Conan the Barbarian. With me, as usual, is Doug Greenberg, and our special guest today is Sean Malloy. Tell us about your podcast, Sean.
Hey, what's up, guys? Can I just first of all say the fact that you guys actually sought me out for this particular film is the ultimate honor, considering that, I don't know if it's your favorite Arnold movie, but I think we can all agree it's the film that kind of put him on the map. I think this is the film that made him a name, if you will. And so the fact that you guys said we really want Sean for this one just warms my heart wholeheartedly. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, Sean. Let's face it here. You're the expert on big, tall, muscular guys in movies. So why wouldn't we have you?
Well, yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, my podcast is I Must Break This Podcast. I'm a super fan of the Big Swede, as many call him, Mr. Dolph Lundgren. And so, yeah, I've been doing it for about 5 years now. We go through his extensive filmography and look at the highs and the lows. And yeah, we look at all his films, and sandwiched in between a lot of the movie review episodes, I've gotten to speak with a number of writers and directors and screenwriters who's gotten to work with Mr. Lundgren. So it's been a lot of fun. Doug has graciously joined me for a few episodes, and we're actually nearing the end. Surprisingly, we're at about 2015, 2016 or so. So we're actually coming to the end. So it's been a fun journey.
So are you looking at new projects now?
Yeah, but basically when he has a new project come out, I immediately kind of strike while the iron's hot. And so we definitely focus on that one.
You know, I've never seen one of these comprehensive career podcasts that actually make it all the way to the end. So I commend you, Sean, for sticking with it.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, it's been tough because some of these movies like Kindergarten Cop 2, for example, oh, good Lord, you know what I mean? That one, yeah. I'm trying to think of some of the other poor ones. It's like, man, like, do I really want to keep doing this? But I mean, some diamonds in the rough that I don't think many people know about that are quite good. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but.
No, I would for sure. I mean, I had so much fun recording those episodes with you, and they surprised me because these are all movies that I've never heard of. Like you have. I mean, he's been on your radar forever. You know, I only know about the big movies that he's been in, and really that his direct-to-video stuff went right over my head. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, and today we are talking about someone who is not direct-to-video, not remotely. Conan the Barbarian. What were your first impressions back in the day? When did you first see it?
For me, I saw it as a kid. I was maybe 10 years old when I first saw it. And, it was, the nudity, where my father never really had any, filters on that stuff when I was a kid. So it was, whatever goes, I was watching 48 Hours, movies like that when I was a kid. So that wasn't as shocking to me as this was the first like kind of sweeping epic movie I've ever seen, like a fantasy style movie.
Yeah, that's very interesting, especially the when he has sex with the witch and she has an orgasm and tries to eat him.
Oh my God, that was bizarre. That frightened me when I was a kid. I remember that for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
But the swords play and like the scenery and all of that stuff was like brand new to me as a kid, and I haven't seen it a whole lot since then, but I definitely ate this up when I was a kid.
I watched it religiously. Mm-hmm. It's like what Rocky is to you and to you Stallone guys. That's what Conan the Barbarian is to me. It's like the movie that made me the person I am. I was all about the Riddle of Steel. It's something I would like to discuss. Just what is the Riddle of Steel? You have any ideas?
And I think. No, not quite yet. But I will say, I think you're not alone. I think kind of like how it's interesting how these movies came about in the 80s. And to my knowledge, to my recollection, I don't think we've seen a single film in the 2000s period that has really kickstarted a huge trend and fad. I mean, if you think about it, like if you look at the Karate Kid, when the Karate Kid came out in 1984, that kickstarted this huge martial arts, a trend here in the United States where dojos started popping up. Everybody wanted to do martial arts. Of course, you could also argue Enter the Dragon really helped speed that along as well. But
everybody
if you look
was
at a film
kung fu
like
fighting.
Conan the Barbarian, yeah, there you go. But if you look at a film like Conan the Barbarian, I mean, yeah, I think you're not alone. This was a film that really got people into maybe not so much bodybuilding, but weightlifting, because like I said earlier, this was the film that put Arnold Schwarzenegger on the map, that made him a household name. And when you see that physique in film, everybody wanted, because we had never seen a human being with that kind of physique before. You know what I mean? Him wielding that sword in that scene where he's training. We had never seen that before on screen.
And that's what got him cast. Yeah. And that's the interesting thing. Yeah. I mean, Conan the Barbarian had like a 5-year pre-production period, and it was mired with problems. Oliver Stone wrote the original screenplay and was set to direct, but they couldn't sell it. So they asked John Milius, who was a personal friend of Stone, to shop it around. And so Milius ended up taking it to Dino. They were set to produce a Viking movie. And so apparently Dino just said, look, you want to do your Viking movie? You come with this Conan script. Why don't we just do this? Then Dino inherited Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was already attached to the project by the original producer. And that's when the problem started, because Arnold and Dino did not get along.
Yeah. I know of the one story where the first meeting, Arnold insulted him.
Yes, we discussed it on our last episode, and this had real repercussions. Arnold and Dino avoided each other, which is a bad thing when you're Arnold Schwarzenegger and you want to be a leading man and you want to get into movies, and this is your first big project.
How established was Dino in Hollywood at this moment?
Dino was huge. I mean, he was a spaghetti western guy.
Right.
And that's Arnold, where the money was.
Arnold coming in as a novice newcomer, and
remember, this was the destitute 70s. Most movies in the 70s had low budgets, except maybe for Apocalypse Now, and we all know what that turned into. A lot of movies were produced in Britain, a lot of movies were produced in Spain and Italy, and a lot of money flowing around in Hollywood was foreign, much like it is now. So you have these producers coming up, like Dino De Laurentiis and like Andrew Vanya, who did First Blood. Those guys wielded a lot of power. So when they don't like Arnold, Arnold has a big problem.
Yeah, well, he tried to do his Arnold thing and walk into an office and be the biggest, loudest person and assert himself. And that works in the bodybuilding circuit, but not in Hollywood.
Yeah, the Italian he was used to was Franco Colombo, and Dino's a different story.
Yeah.
So in the end, it ended up that Arnold finally got to do Conan after Dino gave Conan as a gift to his daughter. His daughter was starting to produce movies, so she became the de facto executive producer. So in many ways, she became the go-between, because of course Arnold and Raffaella got along famously. Arnold always does well with women, I've noticed. So after 5 years, they finally started shooting. This is, of course, after the infamous 1980 Mr. Olympia. Milius saw Arnold in competition shape and said, Arnold, this won't do. You're going to have to start eating some McDonald's, because Conan does not look like this. So Arnold built some fat around his waist, and instead of going to Yugoslavia, they went to Spain. And in Spain, they started shooting for 5 months.
He had to cut weight too, right? He went from like 240 to 210 or something like that.
No, that was for Stay Hungry.
Say, if you look at his, look at his physique, that still is massive and amazing. But if you look at his physique in this compared to the Pumping Iron days or whatever, I mean, he is considerably much slimmer, which actually I think works for the character. I mean, yes, the character is a barbarian, if you will, but he's not this massive, you know what I mean? Like this giant, massive oak tree, I guess, that he was in the documentary.
Yeah, so Arnold in real life, Arnold the competitor, was a lot bigger than the Farzetta paintings that they modeled the movie on. There are, of course, the famous Farzetta images that were always used to illustrate the books of Conan. That's how people know him. That's why he has black hair and a scrunched up face and is overtly muscular. But it does help that Arnold is a little bit, let's say, in the off season.
Yeah, it looks like he's more maneuverable. If you're too big, it's hard to maneuver. You look like a big stiff board. Yeah. So I think it serves him well in this. Unfortunately
for him, he couldn't outrun dogs. Something we should explain about John Milius. John Milius is insane. Mm-hmm. He's one of those old school directors that, if someone is bleeding, wait, no, don't dress that wound yet. Let's get it on film first.
Yeah.
Pain is temporary. Movies are forever. Well, he's one of those guys. So apparently at one point, Arnold was chased by wild dogs or wolves or whatever they were supposed to be in that movie. Perhaps they released the dogs too early or whatever happened, but Arnold got caught on the rock he's supposed to climb. One of the dogs dragged him down. He fell and he needed 12 stitches. So, of course, John Milius said, no, wait with the stitches. We want to see the blood.
He was actually running for his life in that scene, too.
He was running for his life.
Those dogs were pretty vicious.
After 5 years, he was like, what the fuck did I get myself into?
Yeah, they even attacked their handler.
Yeah, interesting, huh?
Those are trained dogs. They hardly seem trained to me.
And they had plenty of animal wranglers because, of course, this is a movie filled with snakes. So to get people used to those things, the snake handler made everyone wear a snake around the set all day. And the only person who could stand it, of course, was James Earl Jones, because James Earl Jones was a Green Beret. And that's standard. You carry a snake around for a couple of weeks and then you eat it. We're talking about a plot here that had some life. This is based on the books of Howard, and those were all short stories, mostly written in the 20s and 30s. Howard didn't live long. He was 30 when he committed suicide, presumably because he couldn't deal with his mother's death, who had died of tuberculosis just a week before. But he did produce an immense amount of work, particularly Conan. At that point was just published in little pulp magazines, but later would be republished as actual novels. And they became, especially in the 60s, they became very popular. The plot mostly based on Kull the Conqueror. Thulsa Doom is actually Kull's arch nemesis, not Conan's. The origin story of Conan is also different. In the books, Conan is a drifter, a Cimmerian, who are nomadic people, whereas in the movie, he becomes a slave and then a pit fighter. So that's what we see. We see young Conan in a little village, and that village is devastated by marauders, and he's sold into slavery. He's turned into an arena fighter. Then he's trained as a mercenary, and once freed, he becomes a thief, because what else do you do when you're an escaped slave? You steal shit. Now, of course, he becomes very successful because he's Conan, but he's driven by a need for vengeance. He must find and kill Thulsa Doom, the man who murdered everyone in his village, including his father and his mother, in front of him, and who stole his father's sword.
I have read a couple of the stories, and I did, I collected comic books growing up. So, I have a few issues of the Conan comic book series. And so I will say, out of all the Conan adaptations that we've seen, there was also a short-lived syndicated television show, based on the character. And I will say,
with Ralph
after
Miller,
having seen all of these and also read the source material, this one is the best adaptation of Howard's work. I mean, especially in terms of tone. I think the other iterations that came about after this are maybe a little too cartoonish, which makes sense. Okay, they were also catering it to a different market, but this one, I think, does a wonderful job capturing just the ultimate gnarly barbarian nature that Conan was raised in. And so
I agree. Yeah, I really enjoy the world building. They don't give us much, but they give us just enough to give an idea of what the Hyborian Age was like.
Yes. And did you also, when I watched it again, what's interesting is Doug was talking about his early experiences with the film. And I'll say, I was pretty similar in that I had my best friend, my neighbor, his dad had a copy of this on beta. And it was a film that we were not allowed to watch a heck of a lot due to the nudity, actually. And so it was one that we kind of snuck around and watched when parents weren't around and things like that. But it's interesting. It's a film that, how do I say this? It's not my favorite Schwarzenegger movie, but it is, I mean, it's almost, I don't know if you guys picked up on this or not, but it's almost kind of an art film in a lot of ways. It's so much more artsy than I think the big blow 'em up action films that
that's definitely
Schwarzenegger ended up doing later on.
I agree with you. That's Milius's influence.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about the guy who co-wrote the screenplay to The Godfather, who co-wrote the screenplay to Apocalypse Now, who was involved in the writing of every major movie in the 70s. I mean, this is a true auteur director.
I noticed that, Sean, in the invasion scene where James Earl Jones has that stare down with Conan's mother before he kills her. That really, it comes through in that moment. It's like there's no dialogue. It's just, I mean, you can, especially in a movie like this, you can really go way too far in the terms of graphic, but they chose to really play it subtle, and I noticed that right off the bat how artsy that scene looked.
Yes, and the entire movie is very layered. There's a lot of hidden meaning in everything you see.
Well, one thing that I'd like to talk about real quick. I mean, and Doug, you already mentioned it. I don't know if you felt this way or not, Doug, but the one thing that I've always felt about this film is, yes, it's artsy, like we said, but if you wanted, I think this film could do, and I wish, but I think if they wanted to, this film could be black and white. And I think that would be pretty cool. Okay. I also think that if you really wanted to, this could be a silent film. And I think in some ways it actually might work better if it was silent, because the acting is some of the best scenes are the scenes without dialogue.
Right.
And so I wonder if anyone has ever done an edit where there is absolutely zero dialogue, or what dialogue there is purely just grunts and sword clanging and sound effects. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And moaning and death rattles and crashes.
Plenty of that. Yeah.
People doing things to alpacas you should not be doing.
Well, since you're dying to get to this Riddle of Steel, Seco, I say
yes, I am.
Go for it.
Okay, the Riddle of Steel is really a metaphor for becoming a man.
Yes,
it's coming of age. It's becoming a warrior. It's finding all the attributes that will make you a conqueror. Because the first part, this was supposed to be a trilogy, and the first part was all about the coming of age of Conan. The second one was supposed to be about responsibility. And first you find strength, then you learn to wield that strength, and finally the final film was supposed to be about loyalty, and that's where Arnold, or I should say Conan, becomes king by his own hand, because he learns loyalty. He learns how to bind people to him, and not just a few, but a kingdom. Of course, this didn't actually materialize, but the first movie does drive home what the Riddle of Steel is supposed to be. I mean, the evil protagonist of the movie, or antagonist, I should say, is Thulsa Doom, and he is pure evil. Mm-hmm. He has a snake cult. Everything you can remotely attribute to being evil, that's what Thulsa Doom is. He manipulates people. He hypnotizes people. He eats people. He makes people eat each other. He makes people sacrifice themselves for nothing. Steel isn't strong. Flesh is stronger. And he just motions for a girl with his hypnotic powers, and she just drops down to her death. Really, the entire movie is not just about vengeance, but about becoming a man with morals.
You know, also speaking to the theme of vengeance, your typical hero's journey has the hero is somewhat reluctant to follow his path. Right. There's some kind of resistance there. But I mean, since the moment his mom's head hits the ground, Conan has vengeance in his heart and on his mind. So there's no I don't believe that this follows like a typical hero's journey storyline.
Yes, he must conquer his own need for vengeance. Mm-hmm. And that's what he does in the final scenes. He kills Thulsa Doom, but he doesn't just kill Thulsa Doom. He also ends his cult. I mean, he could have just stopped at the beheading. Mm-hmm. But he didn't. That's
all he wanted.
That's really all he wanted. But he realized, no, I have to end this cult. And that's why the ending doesn't stop. That's what the executives wanted. It's like, oh, just end it there. Mealy said, no, that's not the point of the movie. The point of the movie is that Conan becomes a just man. He realizes his destiny is not to get vengeance. His destiny is to destroy evil.
So his call to action wasn't just his, blind focus on vengeance.
Well, of course, at first it was.
At first, right.
But after the death of Valeria, he realizes it means a lot more.
Okay.
Her sacrifice could not be in vain.
See, and I interpreted the riddle, I guess, maybe on the same level as you, Siko, but maybe a little bit, slightly different. I kind of looked at it, okay, and go with me on this one. Please don't disparage me or roll your eyes or quit listening to my podcast or anything like that. But I interpret it as kind of a variation on the whole, with great power comes great responsibility motif, if you will. Because if you think about it, the other thing that I really, really like about this film is it makes the sword, okay, the sword of Conan, okay, it makes that a character in itself. Okay, it makes the sword a huge focal point of this movie. And I feel like the other iterations of Conan just made that, that's his weapon that he carries along. But I feel like with this particular film, they make the sword something that is even more of a character than Conan himself, to where he needs to be worthy to carry that and use that in battle. And if you look at all of the characters in the film, yes, all of the characters have weapons, they have blades, they have swords, everything, but many of them are not using it responsibly. And so I looked at it as that was Conan's dad's way of telling him, yo, look, anybody can weld a weapon, anybody can carry a sword, okay, but can you do it responsibly? Can you do it for the greater good, if you will?
And can you trust in that strength? And I think in the end, that's why the Atlantean sword he found in the cave beat his father's sword, because that's what his father tells him. It's like, there's little you can trust in this world. Not men, not women, not beasts. And then he shows the sword, and this you can trust. And that's the important first lesson he takes away from his father.
And I love the fact that the film opens, okay, just going back to the opening, I think to kind of drive that point home. I love the fact that we haven't talked about the score, but oh my God.
No, but we should.
The score to this film. Oh my Lord. But the opening titles with that amazing score, but it's also showing the building and the forging of that particular sword. And I think that is a wonderful way to open this film.
Yes, this score made me discover the Carmina Burana. And if you like classical music and you like the score to Conan, that's something you should listen to. The Carmina Burana is medieval. It has the same drive and pounding and sentiment and sense of barbarity and sense of ancientness that this score has. Especially the melodic part of the score, the romance between Valeria and Conan. There's a subtle undertone of sadness in it, because of course this entire movie is an annal. It's told by Mako, by the wizard. It's describing the early years of Conan. And so when he talks about the lost Valeria, there's an intense sadness that is already kind of foreshadowing what is about to happen. I think the remark you made is like, yes, you could show this as a silent movie, sure, but we do need the score.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I'm okay with doing it in black and white. I'm okay with just not hearing the grunting and the moaning and the death rattles, but we need this score.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, I think there is can you imagine? I was thinking about this too, in my neck of the woods, they do these movies to the symphony type experiences where you go, you watch a movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where you go and you watch a popular movie, but the dialogue is taken out and the entire thing is done purely just with music, if you will.
Sure.
Think this would be wonderful to see take out the dialogue, because to be perfectly honest, I feel like the dialogue almost at times kind of weighs this film down. Yeah, we were talking about the Riddle of Steel, all that, but I feel like
it's functional.
The dialogue. Yeah, take out the dialogue though, and let the sound effects, let the grunting, and let the music do the heavy lifting. And I think in a lot of respects, this film basically does.
There's hardly any dialogue in the first like 30 minutes of the movie.
No. Oh yeah, there's none.
There's some commands shouted during the raid, the village raid, and everything. But that could easily be clipped out. And Arnold, he's got that silent menace, in his composure. Like he can totally pull that off for a whole movie.
Yeah.
He did it as a Terminator.
Yeah, sure. There you go. Yeah.
Again, and that's another part of the Riddle of Steel, becoming at ease with killing other men. The 1,000-yard stare he gets after a few fights, where he realizes, this is how I get victory. Mm-hmm. I must kill others. Right? He's at peace with it.
Right.
He kills another, and I'm cool now.
He got that early on in those arena fights that he was doing.
Yeah, and especially important element of his. And afterwards, because he's so talented at killing people, they actually train him to become a mercenary, to become a great warrior. So he's taken to the East, a great pride, and he's so valuable. They even mate him to slaves, so they can make more little Conans. Which is another interesting scene that I'm sure made this movie porn for you guys, because
they were breeding him.
And there's this story about that scene, is that the actress in that scene was not told what she was going to do. She hadn't seen Arnold before. She was just sort of pushed into that cage he was in, and so Arnold just sort of went with it. He just method acted the whole thing. Those squeals that woman makes are real.
Yeah, look of terror.
Yeah. I think we can agree that is not only is it a story element, but it is a directing method that I think would not fly today.
Right.
No. It's actually, it didn't fly back then, and that's probably one of the reasons John Milius wasn't offered many projects.
Well, if he's as crazy as you say he is, I can see not many.
He did Red Dawn right after this, and Hollywood just hated him for it. They hated him for it because 90% of Hollywood is communist, and he made a war. He basically made the communists invade the United States, and a bunch of teenagers were fighting them. So
I wonder how the Actors Guild felt about his directing methods too. Because if he's not. If he's refusing treatment at the moment to get the shot, I can't imagine many of the actors would be okay with that.
Well, a lot of things went below the radar during those days. Don't forget, they made Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, and in that movie, it was basically psychological torture. Mm-hmm. Shelley Duvall, who played the lead in that, had to do a scene 140 different times.
Yeah.
That's the anguish he wanted to see on screen. So Kubrick just drove her nuts to the point where she would show true anguish.
Yeah, he traumatized her in that, and Alfred Hitchcock did the same thing to the girl in the Birds movie.
Yes. And the irony, of course, is that actors are these really high-strung, sensitive people. It doesn't really take much to unbalance these people. Yeah. So imagine doing that. Pressure.
I think the closest director we have today that does those kind of weirdo, batshit maneuvers, if you will, is David Fincher.
Probably.
From what I understand, I mean, he's still working, he's still putting out films, but I think he may have scaled back a bit. But I remember hearing stories that Jodie Foster in Panic Room, he just took her to the mat in terms of her patience, if you will. And so, I mean, on one hand, it's cool to see that there are directors who are passionate about their art form and want it done perfectly. But then on the other hand, it's kind of, I guess, but also I'm also speaking as the guy who does the Dolph podcast, where a lot of these films are filmed in 3 days, where there's maybe only 2 takes and then they move on. So but I don't know. Going back to this film, though, I know that Schwarzenegger has wanted to do a sequel called, I think it's either King Conan or Legend of Conan, where it follows him actually being the king. But I think due to the poor reception of the 2011 version with Jason Momoa, they've kind of put a halt on that. But
there was a rights problem as well.
Yeah, but it's one of those projects that every now and again Arnold will, when he's doing press conferences or whatever, he'll kind of mention. Who knows if it'll ever happen? But
yes, and I do think Arnold is looking to bookend his career with another Conan movie, with a King Conan movie. I think he's really looking for that now, because
that would be cool.
Yeah, I would agree. We'll see what happens. But then again, he's moving into director streaming TV content now, so with his spy TV show. So we'll see what happens with that. If you had to pick, which fight would you pick?
I love the one towards the end when he finally offs Old Thorson, Sven Old Thorson.
Oh yeah,
that was a good battle. Like hiding amongst the rocks and coming out and slashing somebody to death and then going back into the rocks.
Yeah, he Rambo'd that guy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was all. Few stood against many, so they needed Rambo traps. And according to Milius, he covered that with 5 cameras because they only could do it once. Oh wow!
Wow. Well, there you go.
This was also their Sven Thorson's and Arnold's first matchup out of like 14 or 15, I want to say, right?
Oh, absolutely. You could play a drinking game with how many times Sven Ole Thorson ends up in an Arnold movie. I mean, it's a given. Mm-hmm. It's actually the beers for Sven Ole Thorson, I think shots for Franco Colombo. Because Franco is also in this one. Did you catch Franco?
I didn't catch him.
Okay.
I wanted to go back and look, but I didn't have time.
Next time you watch, when they attack the village, young Arnold hears someone coming. And then there's this guy on a rock covered in tattoos. And he's panting and he's looking at him. And then he pulls out a knife and walks towards the village threateningly. That is Franco.
That's him.
Yeah.
I have to go back and look again.
He's also in the next movie we're about to cover, which is Commando, but they deleted his scene. But he is credited in the movie and they did pay him for it. Hey, it pays to be Arnold's friend.
Yeah, he's definitely loyal to his friends. That's for sure.
If you're Jean-Claude Van Damme, it actually pays to be his kids, because if you look at all of his films of the past 10 years, he always finds a role for one of his kids. So I think all of these action guys, they all have like an entourage, if you will, that I think, I don't know if it's written in the contract, maybe it is, but I think it's one of those things where it's like, look, if you want me for your movie, you will find a role for my friend, or you will find a role for my son, or you will find a role for my daughter, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm.
Well, Arnold passed it on because Chris Pratt, who is Arnold's son-in-law, because Chris Pratt is dating Arnold's daughter, is actually cast Patrick Schwarzenegger in a part in his TV show, in his, what was that called? The Terminal List.
I think they're married, actually. They're not dating anymore. They're officially married. Yeah.
I highly recommend that show, by the way. It is excellent. I really enjoyed it. Woke Content 0.
What network is it on? What streaming service?
It's on Prime.
Amazon Prime.
Okay.
Yeah. It's number 1 on Prime right now.
Oh, wow.
And probably will be for the foreseeable future because it's that good. I'm probably going to rewatch it this summer.
I'll put it on my list.
And look for Patrick Schwarzenegger. Okay, so Arnold had problems with Dino. Of course, all that disappeared as soon as Conan the Barbarian was a success. Then Arnold had another problem with Dino. He couldn't get rid of Dino.
Yep.
Because he was under contract. And he was under contract for multiple movies. And of course, Conan the Barbarian pretty much fell through after this. It was sold to Disney and it became almost slapstick in Conan the Destroyer. So Arnold was really looking to increase his pay and increase his range and do something else than swords and sandals. But of course, that's not what Dino wanted, because this movie cost him a bundle. It cost him 20 million, but it brought him 90 million. So that's a big chunk of change he made there. That's a huge success. It's not success today's standards, perhaps, when you have Top Gun Maverick making 1.2 billion or something, but we're talking 1981, and that's a very different story. This movie was huge, and so Dino was not letting Arnold go.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at Arnold's CV, the last movie he did with Dino was Raw Deal.
Raw Deal.
And if you watch Raw Deal, I mean, yeah, there's a couple of scenes with it that are going for it, but if you watch Raw Deal, that is arguably one of, if not the most disjointed messes in all of Arnold's filmography. That
Absolutely.
film is, I mean, it's the first 10 minutes are like a Smokey and the Bandit, knockoff. And then suddenly it ends with, it ends kind of like Commando, if you will, where Arnold goes in and he's he's an FBI agent too. And he goes in and just completely annihilates everybody. And then at the end, what's bonkers about it, I mean, obviously you guys are going to get to Raw Deal in your podcast later on.
I do enjoy that movie, I have to say. But because it's a bonkers action movie, it makes no sense.
It ends, though. It ends where it ends with Arnold and his partner kind of, getting back together and laughing, yet no care or attention is made to what happened to Arnold's wife in the movie. I mean,
we'll get to that at some point when we cover that movie. But they do actually say, "Oh, my reunion with Amy was a big success." So here's the thing, and this is like you see this throughout the 80s. Arnold's personal life is bleeding into his projects. What I mean by that is that when you look at Arnold and other leading ladies, well, the rumors were, of course, flying. Arnold enjoyed close relationships with his leading ladies because, they helped him with his acting, of course. After Conan the Barbarian, you see Arnold influencing the script in a way that says, look, I don't want to have any on-screen romances anymore. Now, why was this happening? He really, really, really wanted to marry the Kennedy woman.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, so, because they got married in 87.
No on-screen kisses.
Yeah, they got married in 80. Well, and this is, I think also, Sika, we were kind of spared from, I remember, Doug, you said something when you and I were chatting, a Dolph Lundgren movie was, there's nothing more unsettling than watching Schwarzenegger kiss a woman. It's just, you just can't do it. So I think in the end, we were all kind of spared from something that is, that was not needed, I think.
Well, the chasteness does make twins more bearable. I agree. Because if he had, barbarian Travolta's wife the way he did Sandal Bergman in this movie, I'm not sure if that movie would have been the success it was.
No. Yeah. When we get to twins, we'll talk about Kelly Preston. Wow.
Yeah. But going back to Conan, I mean, like I said, it's not my favorite. It's not my favorite Schwarzenegger movie, and I think a lot of that, to be perfectly honest, is because I saw other Schwarzenegger movies first. Okay.
Oh, sure.
So I have more of an attachment to those, but this one I think is just so important to look at because it is it's the epitome, I think, of what Arnold could bring to a movie, and I think when this film came out, everybody saw not only was that the physique that they wanted to attain, but I think producers and everybody attached saw wow, this guy has value. Okay. And if we attach him to our film, it's a guaranteed moneymaker. And I would, and I've talked about this with a buddy a million times, I would so go back to these days. I mean, if you think about it nowadays in Hollywood, what we have driving the box office and what we have selling things are franchises and IPs. Okay. That's all that comes to theaters anymore. But I personally would love to go back to the days when the conversation was, hey, what are you going to go see? Oh, we're going to go see that new Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. You know what I mean? Back in the day, you had an actor of a name.
Except for Tom Cruise, the days of stars are over.
I think Tom Cruise, Denzel, and Tom Hanks. I think those are really pretty much the three last movie stars that we have.
I think after his last outing, I think Tom Hanks is done. And what was the last thing Denzel did?
Well, you got, what was the Equalizer? Maybe it was
the Equalizer. And I think those are straight to streaming now. So
about the Rock, Dwayne Johnson.
Oh, yeah. But you know what's interesting, Doug?
Crowd.
Aren't you lukewarm on The Rock? I know I am.
I am, yeah.
He doesn't cut it.
Here's what's interesting about The Rock, and I've been saying this, for the past couple of years. What's fascinating about The Rock is a businessman, and he knows.
Well, his ex-wife is.
Well, but he knows where his bread and butter is. And so if you look at every movie that Rock does, he always attaches himself to some kind of kiddie franchise or something that he knows is like some kind of adaptation to Jumanji, Baywatch. He very rarely will you see him sign on for some original project.
Yeah, that's why he's trying to steal Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I've been saying it for a while, but I feel like, you know what The Rock is he's not an Arnold, because what The Rock does, he reminds me, he's that varsity athlete who insists on playing at the JV level because he knows that he'll be the MVP that way.
It's easy.
He'll never go up to the big leagues.
Yeah, he's a wannabe.
Yeah.
It makes sense. And he's not like every time a Dwayne Johnson movie comes out, it's like, I have to go see this.
Nope.
Throughout Arnold's career, Stallone's career, even though I admittedly saw almost nothing in the theaters, it was always like, I have to see the next Arnold movie or I have to see the next Stallone movie. Sorry, Sean. I wish I could say the same about Dolph.
Come on, Doug. Come on. This is why I wasn't invited to your wedding, right, Doug? There you go.
That's the reason. I
was big on Dolph in the 80s. I was really rooting for him, and I was really hoping that Masters of the Universe, I loved Masters of the Universe. Ironically, He-Man is kind of a derivative of Conan.
It was, yeah.
I loved it, and I sort of enjoyed the movie, but I wished it would have been more. You know what I mean? And I don't think it was for lack of Dolph Lundgren. He looked the part, he acted the part, he felt like He-Man. To me, he's He-Man. Like Lou Ferrigno is the Hulk, and like
Arnold is Conan.
Arnold is Conan, and Dutch Schaefer, and the Terminator, etc. And that's, I think, the main difference with Arnold and all the others is Arnold's legacy and Arnold's shadow is a little bit bigger. The only person who actually supersedes Arnold in any way is Stallone, particularly in the 80s, because his characters are indelible, stand the test of time.
Well, and Arnold also knew, though. I mean, you also got to look at Arnold and Stallone both as businessmen, because they both were very, very different. Okay, if you look at a guy like Stallone, Stallone wanted total control. Okay, and so if you look at all of it,
have total control.
He had to have control. And you could say, I mean, maybe it worked out for him, sure. But Arnold, on the other hand, he knew that maybe he was a little bit rough around the edges in terms of his acting, but he also aligned himself with the director who really knew what he was doing, then that could make him shine. And so, I mean, just look at Stallone's films in Stallone's prime compared to Arnold's films in Arnold's prime.
Arnold made the better choices.
Arnold, he's working with James Cameron. He's working with Ivan Reitman. He's working with John Milius. And then who is Stallone working with? You really can't name the directors on many of Stallone's films. Why is that? Because he hired someone who he knew he could push around.
Yes.
And I think that is the big difference between the two of them.
Stallone is not director friendly. Arnold is.
He wants to inject too much of his own directing style into it.
And I think Stallone has to do that because Stallone is very sensitive and cognitive of his limitations. As long as he has control over a project, he can write it, he can sort of mess with the dailies, he can talk the director into stuff. As long as he has that, he has a good movie. When he doesn't, it's always a clunker.
That's why Doug, I haven't listened to your discussion on Bullet to the Head yet, but that was one of the things that was amazing to me, how late in Stallone's career, he decided to work with Walter Hill.
Yeah, the tragedy of it.
You know, and Walter Hill is just one of the most amazing action directors of all time. Brilliant. And so it's interesting, like that Stallone, you know, option for that. I wonder how much of that final movie is more Stallone compared to Walter Hill, but yeah.
Well, I actually have listened to it, and I can recommend it to everyone listening to this podcast. It is actually a good episode to listen to from the perspective of, okay, what happens to an aging star who's lost touch?
We had a lot of fun with that one.
You had fun with it. Yeah. And I think the major difference with Arnold is not because Arnold is smarter than Stallone or more talented than Stallone. Arnold had the better wife. She's the power behind the throne. She was the one reading the scripts and simply saying to him, look, Arnold, this is the script you have to do.
She was also the one who was, looking the other way when he was fooling around with the maids.
Yeah, I don't think she cared. I don't think she cared until it became a political thing.
Public, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a political marriage in every sense of the word. Sorry.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I don't know if you guys have read Arnold's autobiography, but
I have.
Yeah, it's a really good read. But
the book is written entirely to get her back.
But I mean, I remember hearing that she was fully aware of what was going on, but
she's way smarter than he is. Let's not kid each other.
She came from the world of politics, and so she's
a Kennedy.
Yeah, she knew that if she got out when she did, then that was going to affect her exponentially. I mean,
she's a woman. She runs that household. She sees that little boy running around, looking exactly like Arnold. I mean, it doesn't take much to add up, especially knowing what you already know from other stuff. The good part about that whole thing, about that marriage, is that she steered Arnold in the right direction. She pushed him into projects that really worked. And every movie he made more money, and the movie itself got smarter. So after Commando, which was really a spoof on Stallone, it's a tongue-in-cheek movie. After Commando, he did Running Man, which was a really good script. It wasn't as successful as everybody had hoped, but it was a really good script. And after that movie came Predator, which is arguably the greatest action movie of the 80s. Certainly the greatest cult classic action movie of the 80s. Everybody still loves that movie, and rightfully so. And that's another thing. We talked about Arnold making the right choices. It's also Arnold, the contributor, and Arnold realizing he's in an ensemble cast and everybody needs to shine in that movie. And that's something you see happening. And it's something that we'll cover when we cover Predator. And it's also something that you already see in Conan the Barbarian to an extent, because it's not just the Arnold show. Everybody gets their little fight. Everybody gets to shine. And the irony, of course, in that is that main cast were all extremely inexperienced actors. Mm-hmm. Jerry Lopez was John Milius' surfer buddy. And Sandal Bergman was a dancer. And Milius had just seen her in something, in some movie that was that hadn't even come out yet, a small jazz movie. And he was like, yes, that's my Valkyrie. I have to get her. She couldn't act.
Well, there's some glaring evidence of like the inexperience of some of these actors in this film. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, you compared this a little bit to Predator, and that's the difference. Like this, Arnold himself, like top to bottom, these except Max von Sydow and James Earl Jones, they were all no-name actors. In Predator, that is a heater of a lineup, top to bottom.
Yeah, that's a collision of egos.
Oh my God!
In a really good way.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, Arnold has always been very generous to his cast. I mean, if you look at Conan the Destroyer, I know Conan the Destroyer is extremely weak in comparison, but that film is it's a group team up movie, and you know what I mean, where Conan teams up with a variety of other characters, we can say, to see a goal through in the end. And in that particular one, all of those characters get a little something to do. They all get their moment. And if you want to compare this again to Stallone, I mean, even in something like The Expendables, where Stallone was ringleader to all these guys. Yeah, I mean, some of those characters do get their moments, but a lot of those characters, unfortunately, get dropped because it's Stallone's show. And I don't mean that to disparage him or discredit him in any way, but I think we can agree, Arnold, if you're going to compare the two guys, because both these guys, their careers parallel each other amazingly, but I think we can agree Arnold on that front is definitely more generous.
A better team player.
We can say.
A better team player.
Yeah.
And Stallone, of course, has his, let's say, artistic issues with continuity. So I'm sure he means well, but his mind is just not wired to tell continuous stories. He tells stories in the moment. He makes things effective in that moment, and he doesn't care about what happened before, and he's certainly not planning for anything after. You see that with Rocky, you see that with Rambo. When you watch those movies on their own, they're great. But when you try to make sense of them as a story, it won't work. Arnold understood that, and perhaps it's a Hollywood thing. That could be it. And Arnold understood that, or perhaps his wife understood that, and that's why he shied away from sequels. I mean, he could have done a Commando 2, which would have been Die Hard, but they said no, which is ironic because the Die Hard script is incredible. And so it went to Bruce Willis, and you can thank Arnold for creating the star Bruce Willis, because Arnold said no. And of course, you can also thank Stallone's downfall, because Arnold suggested to Stallone, hey, you should do this awesome movie. I don't have the time, but you should really do it. It's called Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, and it's with Estelle Getty. You will love it. Everybody will love you.
Yeah, one of the biggest trolls in Hollywood.
Amazing.
That's why you like Arnold so much, is because he's a troll just like you are. Absolutely.
And like I said, I mean, I'm pretty much a product of Conan the Barbarian in many ways. And so Conan is exactly the same way. He's trolling everybody in that movie.
It's funny.
Yeah. And sometimes he gets his comeuppance when they talk, especially when they talk religion, right? When they start talking about, he talks about Crom with Subutai. And he's like, yeah, I pray to Crom, blah, blah, blah. And, he's strong. And when I die, I have to go before him. And when I don't know the Riddle of Steel, he will cast me out of Valhalla and laugh at me. And so Subutai just says, well, my God is stronger. And he's like, what? And it's like, well, my God is the everlasting sky, and your God lives beneath him.
He had no response to that.
He just sort of thinks out loud. He's thinking, because the entire movie is also that there's a subplot on religion. And in the end, Arnold wrestles away from his enslavement to Crom, basically by saying to Crom, look, you have to grant me revenge, or otherwise, to hell with you. What use are you? And that's Arnold, the final part of the Riddle of Steel, that's unshackling himself mentally, so he can stand up to Thulsa Doom, who will dominate him mentally if he lets him. It almost happened at the end, of course, where Arnold confronts Thulsa Doom, and Thulsa Doom starts to hypnotize him, and he just snaps out of it at the last minute and then chops his head off.
That was pretty cool.
Oh, awesome. I have a cool detail about that too. It's a blood bag taped to James Earl Jones's neck. Arnold did that stunt with James Earl Jones. Arnold slices into the blood bag with the sword while James Earl Jones is there. That's not a stunt, man. James Earl Jones just said, oh, you can do it.
Yeah, it looked like it was both the actors. I didn't think, because he hits him. It's very clear. He does whack him, but I didn't think that it was a real sword. I found an interview with James Earl Jones, and they said, no, we did that stunt together because James Earl Jones trusted Arnold enough, and he was a tough guy. I mean, James Earl Jones is a former Green Beret, so hey, what are you going to do to me, right? Wow.
Yeah, here we go, 1980s filming.
Well, and I mean, the other wonderful thing about that scene is how you see Arnold hacking away at James Earl Jones. And now I'm not going to get into the logistics of what it's like to, behead someone. I have no idea about that. But I feel like in a lot of movies, especially, the ones that we've seen nowadays, it's almost done so comedically and gracefully, like it's easy to do that. I think the other wonderful thing about this film and how it's in tone with Howard's creation is the barbarian nature of the character and of this world. And if you are literally going to take a sword to one of someone's appendages or head, in the case of James Earl Jones, it's not going to be one fell swoop and then it's off. Okay. It's going to be
you're chopping. You're
chopping. And that's the other thing that I love about this is that this film is, I mean, if you compare this one to Conan the Destroyer, this one is so leaning heavily into the fact that he is a barbarian. Okay, that this is our barbaric world. I would say if anyone has not seen it, it kind of came and went when it came out in 2007. But there's a really cool movie called Pathfinder, directed by Marcus Nispel, about Vikings and whatnot. And that film, I would say, is more of a sequel in terms of tone to Conan than any of the Conan iterations are. So if you haven't seen Pathfinder, it parallels this film wonderfully.
I'm going to have to look at that then.
But
here's my childhood.
Real quick, can I just say real quick, guys? I am so honored that you guys saw me as being manly enough to join you guys and tackle this film with you. So thank you for that.
Well, I do listen to your podcasts religiously. For me personally, it's you were really, really high on my list. You're one of the guys I just wanted to work with when I joined this network. It's like, great, I get to talk to the Dolph Lundgren guy.
Oh, thanks. Oh, thanks, man.
That's one of the reasons why this network works so well, because we're all collaborating. And I think by collaborating, we create something greater than our own podcasts.
Right. Nobody's trying to one up one another. It's like it's cohesive and it works.
What is your takeaway from Conan the Barbarian in terms of what it did for Arnold's career?
Man, it's widely known as like, this is the springboard of Arnold into stardom. This could have very easily been just like a low budget B-roll kind of film, but especially considering the subject matter, like you don't see these big medieval epics as like, especially at this time,
they took it seriously.
Like mainstream. Yeah, they did. It
feels like a Spartacus.
Yes, that's a great comparison to it. They handled it very carefully, and even with all the unknown actors. I mean, even Spartacus had Kirk Douglas in it.
Yeah.
Even with all these
Laurence
unknown
Olivier.
actors. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think also like a lot of luck had to go their way to get it to where it needed to be. But I mean, luck is the product of opportunity meets preparedness. And
there's the brilliance of John Milius. He had a big budget. Dino basically said, look, this movie has to work. Do whatever you want. He had complete trust.
Yeah.
And they took the budget and stretched it. What they did was they didn't shoot it in Mexico or they didn't shoot it in California somewhere. No, they went to Spain where you can film cheap, where you can still get like 1,500 extras and have that fit your budget, because those also do mountain scenes. Those are all extras. And they were there for weeks. I mean, this is a really expensive movie. They found a way to get more on film than you would expect for that kind of thing. And that's a testament to the type of directors we got that came out of the 70s, like Spielberg, like Lucas, Coppola, you name them. Those were people who understood filmmaking. And
another thing that surprises me too about how this did launch Arnold is he had a lot against him, especially with his thick accent too. And even in this, they had to work around it.
Yeah, and his weird name.
Yeah, but it made him so marketable that from here on out, they found it easier to work with his accent and get that man on film than to just hire somebody else.
Yes, and that was arguably lucky. Arnold was cast because he had a weird accent, because Conan was supposed to have a weird speech. So it fit him perfectly. And I think he was perfectly content to play Conan until the end of his days. But after Conan, I think Arnold realized, or perhaps his wife did, there's a lot more you could do.
And he did. And that's what we'll be covering in our next episode. That will be Commando. One of my favorite Arnold movies. I can't wait for that one. Commando that's another one that I saw young and I grew up watching. As cheesy and campy as it is, I loved every stupid second of that film.
Yes, but the stupidity works.
Yeah,
it is so over the top stupid, and everybody is so tongue in cheek about everything.
Yeah,
it's I think the closest thing successful compared to that movie is, I think, Cannonball Run, which is also, you can tell all the actors are all tongue in cheek and all the jokes are off the cuff, and
it's under the guise of a serious film, but it's really beneath the surface. It's not, and it's going to be interesting comparing that to Predator, because
definitely, and I have high expectations because we are getting this as a guest, the CEO of our network, Ryan. So I'm really interested in seeing what his take will be on Commando, because I don't think he's seen a lot of it, but he does cover the Rambo sagas. So as a Rambo guy, it should be interesting to watch Arnold do what Stallone does.
Yeah. We'll dig into it, and for sure it'll be a great discussion.
All right. Well, Sean, thank you for being with us. Do you have any parting words?
Well, yeah, thank you guys. This has been a wonderful pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on for this one. This is like I said, this is the ultimate product of the '80s. I don't know if we'll ever get a movie like this again, but it certainly is the one that kind of paved the way for Arnold's career. And I had a lot of fun tackling it with you guys. I think I think this is one of the most manly films in all of Arnold's filmography, but it's also one of the most artsy. I think we can agree. So thank you guys for sharing this one with me and letting the Dolph guy come on and chat this one.
Yeah, it's great talking to you, Sean. And
I'll just throw it out there. I'm coming to the end of Dolph's CV, and a lot of these films are unknown and unseen. So if you guys are ever thinking like, man, Hard Night Fallen, I haven't heard of that, but I'd like to discuss it. Hey, let me know, and I'd love to have you on.
Very cool. Thanks a lot, buddy. Sean. All right. Well, thanks, Doug, and I'll see you on the next episode.
You got it, Seiko. It's been a pleasure as always, my friend.
Thank you, good sir. Until next time.